Good morning. The committee will come to order. I thank everyone for joining us this morning, and I want to especially thank the witnesses for being here today. In today's economy, there is no doubt that digital technology has revolutionized the way entrepreneurs are looking to build, grow, and manage a successful business. Whether it is utilizing the latest app to advertise a product or engaging in the sharing economy by renting out a workspace online, these type of inventions have been a catalyst for small businesses in just the last decade. In fact, 3 out of 4 American small businesses utilize tech platforms for sales, according to industry estimates. And an even higher amount use at least one digital platform to display products and services as well as advertise. By harnessing the opportunities of digital platforms and marketplaces, many small businesses and entrepreneurs are experiencing growth and success. Look no further than the small businesses testifying here today. It is also no secret that some of our country's most innovative ideas and successful small businesses are hatched within our rural communities. Yet, in many rural areas throughout this nation, the absence of reliable broadband threatens to hold back an entire subset of entrepreneurs. Approximately 14 million rural Americans and 1.2 million Americans living on tribal lands still lack mobile LTE broadband at speed of 10 megabytes per second. Put another way, more than 30% of rural residents lack broadband, compared to just 2% of urban residents. Among rural tribal residents, the share increases to 66%. The stories behind these numbers are of real entrepreneurs whose ability to secure affordable capital, expand into new markets, and hire workers are all jeopardized without reliable internet access. So it is important that any technological leap to 5G or future investment in infrastructure from Congress secures access to reliable broadband no matter where in the U.S. the next small business finds itself. We cannot, however, encourage small businesses to adopt today's digital platforms without simultaneously ensuring they have the training and resources necessary to protect themselves against cyber attacks and bad actors. Therefore, today's conversation about expanding digital opportunities for rural entrepreneurs must also consider how we, as members of this committee, can work to make it easier and more affordable to the budding small business to not only utilize digital technology, but be smart about not exposing themselves to greater risks. Government policies should also keep pace with technological innovations and empower rural entrepreneurships to look beyond geographic boundaries. In order to access new markets and customers all over the world, small businesses need policies that encourage digital growth, not hinder it. Finding the right balance to expand the reach and capabilities of rural entrepreneurs while also keeping them safe is a priority for this committee. It is my hope that today's discussion can help identify ways to support and expand the number of businesses utilizing digital platforms, particularly for those that are in more rural communities. With that, I thank each of the witnesses for joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony. I now like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Chabot, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and good morning to all those that are here today, and want to thank the witnesses especially for taking the time out of their busy workday to be here with us today. And before I get into my truly stimulating and emotional and inspiring opening statement on digital opportunities for rural entrepreneurs, I would like to introduce, we've got 3 students here shadowing me today, so if you 3 could stand up. These 3 are from The Ohio State University, so we appreciate them being here. So let's hear it. So they've seen us discuss NATO, in foreign affairs. They've seen us discuss VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and amendments on transgender issues and a whole range of issues. And so we're going to try to make the Small Business Committee just as interesting here today, and I'm sure we will succeed. So I'll get right into it. Here's my stimulating speech. The use of digital technologies, including access to high-speed internet and online tools, is gaining popularity in rural areas because of the opportunities they create for small businesses throughout the countryside. Increasingly, digital tools and platforms form the foundation of success for the modern-day American small business. Small businesses that use digital tools are more nimble, resourceful, and able to reach more potential customers. It's no surprise that digitally powered businesses earn twice the revenue and are 3 times more likely to create jobs. And that's, after all, what this is all about. What this committee's about is trying to create more jobs for more Americans. Unfortunately, there continues to be a lack of data about the rural aspect of the small business economy. What we do know, however, is that 27% of rural residents still do not have access to high-speed internet connection. In addition to this lack of infrastructure, rural areas lack skilled IT professionals to assist in the adoption of more advanced digital technology. That's why this new report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is so timely and important. The Chamber surveyed over 5,000 small business owners across rural America about the economic impact of the online tools and technology on their businesses. Among other findings, they discovered that while the e-commerce ecosystem boosts sales and reduces costs for rural small companies, such firms are adopting digital tools at a pace much slower than their urban counterparts. The study also found that greater use of digital tools and technology could increase greater economic potential for rural small businesses across the country. With better access to digital tools and technology, the Chamber's analysis shows potential economic benefits in rural areas that is far-reaching. For example, the study projects that gross sales for rural small firms could increase by more than 20% over the next 3 years, the equivalent of $84.5 billion per year. Such increases would also lead to an additional $46.9 billion to the U.S. gross domestic product and create over 360,000, so about 1/3 of a million jobs. I'm looking forward to today's discussion and a further examination of these numbers and hearing suggestions about how we can increase the utilization of digital tools and technologies. The goal, of course, is to unlock the vast potential that's out there in the rural small businesses. And again, Ms. Velasquez, thank you very much for holding this hearing. I know that was pretty stimulating, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and if committee members have an opening statement, we will ask that they be submitted for the record. I would like to take just a minute to explain the timing rules. Each witness gets 5 minutes to testify, and every member gets 5 minutes for questioning. There is a lighting system to assist you. The green light comes on when you begin, and the yellow light means that there is 1 minute remaining. The red light comes on when you are out of time, and I will ask to please try to stay within that time frame. I would like now to yield to Mr. Golden from Maine to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce, very honored and happy to introduce first Mr. Dana F. Connors. Mr. Connors is president of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, where he oversees a broad range of activities, including advocacy efforts, economic and workforce development initiatives in the state of Maine, and a wide variety of member services for the business community. He's a Maine native who received a bachelor's degree in public management from the University of Maine in 1965. And I would just say, as someone who worked for 4 years in the Maine State Legislature, worked closely with Mr. Connors and his business advocacy inside the State House, he is a class act in an age that can sometimes be somewhat divisive in our political world. This is exactly the kind of guy that you want representing businesses before state legislatures and Congress. He knows how to keep the focus on the business, on the community, and pulling people together. So I just want to thank you for that. You've always been someone that I look up to very much. So thank you, sir. Look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you. I recognize now Mr. Delgado from New York to introduce our second witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is also my honor to introduce our second witness, Mr. Bill Ingersoll. He was raised in Sloansville in Schoharie County, which I just had a town hall in this weekend. He grew up racing motocross. As the son of a single mother, money was always tight. This led Bill and his grandfather and business partner to begin buying and selling ATVs and ATV parts to supplement the cost of racing. In 2008, Bill tragically suffered a severe spinal cord injury, which confined him to a wheelchair. The accident marked a turning point in his life, catalyzing his eBay career and leading him to start an e-commerce business. Since 2010, Bill has been using his passion for motocross to sell ATV parts in his eBay store, bikes, trikes, and quads. I look forward to hearing from Bill today. We had a great conversation earlier in my office, and there's a lot of wonderful insights as to what it means to be a business owner in a rural community like Schoharie, and how critically important it is for us to focus on digital needs, particularly rural broadband. So thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Now I recognize Ms. Finkenauer from Iowa to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very excited to have an Iowan here today and introduce Miss Stout. Miss Stout makes paper flowers from her home in State Center, Iowa. She started her Etsy shop back in 2010 and began gaining traction a few years later after her son was born. Living with fibromyalgia, her creative business allows her to do her work on her own schedule, which has benefited her family greatly. Ms. Stout sells through multiple platforms as well as through her own website. She manages every part of her shop, and her husband helps out occasionally. She has many international sales and hopes to be able to hire an employee soon to give back to her community. We are very happy to have you here and really look forward to your testimony today. Thank you, Ms. Stout. And I yield back.
Thank you. And now I would like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Chabot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today's final witness is Mr. Jake Ward, President of the Connected Commerce Council, or 3C, a membership organization for small businesses powered by digital. 3C works to provide small businesses with access to the market's most effective digital tools available, provides coaching to optimize growth and efficiency, and works to cultivate a policy environment that considers and respects the interests of small business. Jake is the co-founder and former CEO of Application Developers Alliance and Forward Strategies. We thank you for joining us here today. Look forward to your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chabot. Mr. Connors, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Chabot, and distinguished members of the Small Business Committee. My name is Dana Connors. I'm President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and I thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to appear before you today and for the privilege of doing so. This is an extremely important issue for the state of Maine, which is my perspective to this report, and because it does show what we anecdotally have become aware of, but puts proof behind the actual issue, and we're grateful for that opportunity. And while I'm at it, I want to be sure to express my appreciation to the Chamber, to NDP Analytics, as well as Amazon and the team that came together to put this report before you and to show the importance, the impact, and frankly the necessity that it creates for states like Maine that is predominantly rural and small business. So I thank them for that. My job is as the good congressman from Maine, which we miss in Maine, and we're grateful that you're representing us in Washington. We do miss you at our state capitol. You too are a class act, may I say. We, as he said, work hard to promote a positive business environment in Maine, and doing that, we represent a network of over 5,000 businesses at all sizes, representing all sectors, and from all regions of the state. We advocate on their behalf, and we try to provide those types of programs and partnerships that allow them to do what they do best, which is to run their business and be successful at it. You probably are aware somewhat of Maine because many of you perhaps have vacationed there, because we have 38 million to 40 million a year that come to our beautiful state, and that's probably the reason our number plates bear the name Vacation Land. But I want you also to know that we're rich in history, We have vibrant communities, and we're unparalleled in work ethic. And when people ask me about Maine and describe it in one word, I say it's quality. Quality of our people, our place, as well as our products. Our state is a fabulous place to vacation. It's also a fabulous place to live and work. You also need to know that our population is about 1,350,000, spread over 33,000 square miles. And by the way, that's the size of the rest of New England. You also need to know that our population, 60%, lives in the rural area. That makes us the most rural state in the country. But when you look at the size of our business, you also need to take into account that the federal level describes small business as under 500. 75% of our businesses are under 10. And when you consider we have 35,000 businesses, only 64 exceed that 500. So we are the subject in so many ways of this report. And that's why this report is so important to us, because it opens the door to opportunity, it provides a direction, and it creates a necessity for us to move on it. I would like to share with you that we have made progress. We are rural, we are small, but the state has been, as you have implied in your opening comments, moving in this direction. There's a lot left to do, but we're moving in the right direction. I want to give you a couple examples to bear this out. The first is a woman who left New York City to come to Maine. She didn't go to Portland, where most of our population is. It has a great reputation as a foodie city. She chose our least populated county in the state, Washington County. When she came there about 10 to 14 years ago, there was no high-speed broadband internet connection. But she made it her priority to do just that. And today, because of that commitment in that most rural part of our state, I'll give you two examples to bear out. Cranberry Isle is a group of islands. There's 141 people that live there. It's also now the residence of a renowned artist who came there for vacation but loved it like so many people do, wanted to move there. This high-speed internet connection now provides him to sell his art throughout the world and to live and work on Cranberry Island. There's another astrophysicist who lives on Roque Bluffs, another very small community of probably 250 at max. This aerophysicist works with NASA, has connections to University of Phoenix, established that as vacation, but he too is there. I can see I'm running out of time and I barely got started. I'm hopeful that during the questions that will bear out how important this is, and the report builds a case that in Maine very certainly applies. And I hope the questions will give me the opportunity to expand as I would like to do.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Mr. Ingersoll, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Chabot, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate in this important hearing on how digital tools improve rural entrepreneurship. I started in rural Sloansville. My name is Bill Ingersoll. I own Bike Strikes and Quads, a small business. I started in rural Sloansville, New York. We sell motocross and ATV equipment on eBay to customers around the U.S. and increasingly around the world. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences on some of the tools that make running my eBay business possible in rural America, including rural broadband access, universal and reliable postal service, and breaking down barriers through global trade. I grew up racing motocross in upstate New York. My entire life changed when I was injured in a motocross crash and left paralyzed in 2008. After the accident, I could no longer work construction or do many of the other things I had done previously, but I was determined to move forward with my life. My grandfather and I had always fixed up old ATVs as a hobby, so I was looking a way to turn that hobby into a business. Not long after, I was trying to find some parts to modify an ATV we had so that I could get around our property more easily. I ended up tracking them down on eBay. The process was so easy and convenient for me as a buyer that I began to look into selling parts on eBay. We already had a large stock of parts from ATVs and dirt bike from years of racing, so we decided to give it a try. We opened our eBay store in 2010 and have been selling since. I now have 3 employees and run my business out of a warehouse on my property. I often look back today, 10 years later, and wonder what life might look like now without eBay, and I really don't know. Being 23 years old with minimal education in a poor rural area never fostered good odds for an able-bodied person, let alone someone who is now disabled. eBay and being able to run a business online has given me a life that I may have not otherwise enjoyed. Living in rural upstate New York, I would not be able to use eBay if I didn't have access to high-speed internet and affordable broadband. Unfortunately, broadband reliance and even phone connectivity continue to be constant issues for our company. Rural broadband is essential to ensuring that rural small business owners and entrepreneurs can take advantage of the latest technologies and reach customers around the world no matter where they live in our country. There used to be a few ATV dealers in my area who sold locally but were not online. Unfortunately, none of them are in business anymore. We need real investment in improving and expanding our rural communications infrastructure so that businesses like mine can take advantage of innovative tools and marketplaces like eBay. Even though my store is online, I still have to actually ship products to customers around the country and around the globe. I rely heavily on the U.S. Postal Service to reach my customers. Over 80% of our shipments go through USPS. I understand there are proposals that would make my package delivery to rural parts of the country like my hometown non-essential. I can't imagine how anyone could consider small businesses like mine non-essential, but cutting access to postal services or raising prices for rural package delivery would be disastrous for rural small businesses. Most people don't know that private shippers charge surcharges to deliver to rural areas. If I had to rely only on private shippers or if package services went up dramatically, my costs would go through the roof. Like broadband, the U.S. Postal Service is essential for all Americans no matter where they live, and without it, rural small businesses will have a harder time competing with giant e-commerce companies that have their own warehouses and logistics networks. Small e-commerce businesses depend on reliable, affordable, and universal postal service. On top of selling to our customers in the U.S., selling globally has been key to our success. We've shipped thousands of orders globally to some countries where ATVs are their prime mode of transportation. Selling worldwide allowed us to reach customers and realize new opportunities that we would have otherwise not considered. These opportunities are a direct result of conducting business online and never would have existed before the internet. Small online businesses like mine across the U.S. and rural and urban areas need trade policies that cut red tape for low-value shipments by supporting higher de minimis thresholds throughout the world. That way, small businesses like mine can truly take advantage of one of the best things the internet has to offer, hundreds of millions of buyers all over the world. On behalf of rural businesses across the country, thank you again for holding this important hearing. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ingersoll. And now, Ms. Stout, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Afton Stout, and I'm a creative entrepreneur from rural Iowa. Before I begin, I want to thank everybody who's been a part of me being here today, my mom and my brother, and of course my husband, Brian, and my 3-year-old son, Riss. I also want to send a thank you to my dad, who passed away in 2006, because I know he would be super proud of me for being here today. Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez, and Ranking Member Shabbat, and members of the committee for inviting me to speak with you today about my creative business. I was born and raised in eastern Montana in an even more isolated area than I live in now. My dad was diagnosed with systemic lupus the year that I was born, and I believe that my family's struggles with poverty have been a big part of who I am today. Growing up with limited means instilled a sense of restraint when it comes to money and spending it wisely. I've always been motivated by creating and selling, starting out in small craft shows in my hometown of Glendive, Montana. I can remember buying items from Etsy when I got my first bank card, which was pretty exciting. I had always planned to start a shop, despite being both intimidated and inspired by the success of others. I assumed that living in a small town would be a hardship for my creative ventures that I would have to struggle to overcome. However, I'm certainly not alone in that space, as 27% of Etsy sellers are from rural areas like mine. After graduating from the local college, I worked 2 jobs and crafted on the side, selling through local online groups to keep my mother and me afloat after my dad's life insurance ran out. In 2013, my mom remarried, and I was able to kind of rethink my life and decide what I wanted to do. My stepdad was a huge help in getting me settled in Iowa, which I am super grateful for. That same year, I met my husband and went on to marry him in 2014. And for our wedding, I handmade all of the flowers from paper. which was kind of the spark that sent me onto my entrepreneurial journey. For the first year of our marriage, I made a few pieces of jewelry, some of which I did list on Etsy. And after my son was born in 2015, I decided that I would stay home with him and see if I could find a few more people who were interested in handmade flowers for their weddings or events. And from there, things just kind of took off. Thanks to the internet, I am one of 2.1 million sellers on Etsy, many of whom, like me, are able to run our creative businesses from home despite living in a rural area. This has improved my quality of life immensely. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2012, an illness that I've been fighting since middle school, which ultimately led to me dropping out of high school. I didn't allow it to hold me back. I took my GED a few months later and went to a local college to get my associate's degree. And like many creative entrepreneurs, I didn't set out to become a full-time micro-business owner, but I'm very, very happy that I'm able to do this. When I first started out, I started out advertising on Facebook and listed custom order handmade flowers on Etsy. My first year, I had about $37,000 in sales, which I thought was absolutely amazing. At the end of 2016, I started working with wooden flowers, and the business just kind of exploded from there. After posting some of those on Etsy, my sales nearly tripled. Starting out, most of my sales were online, with like roughly 10% being local in-person sales. Since then, I've had customers from all over the world, including France and Germany. With a platform like Etsy, I'm able to ship beautiful flowers made in Iowa to international buyers that truly value my work. Today, the bulk of my business is wedding related. I custom dye and arrange wooden flowers to match wedding themes and other events. I'm able to work with very, very many lovely people that I would never know or even reach without the internet or online platforms like Etsy. I'm making a push for a bigger local presence, and even Etsy helps with that by showing search results with local businesses closer to the top of the search. I work 12-hour days during wedding season, but I love what I do, and I get to work with people who are absolutely amazing. I'm proud to say that I'm projected to be 80% above where I was last year in views and sales, and I may have to hire my husband to help me run things once my 3-year-old starts preschool this fall. In 2016, my husband started staying home full-time with our toddler so that I could work full-time on my creative business. He has trauma-induced arthritis in both of his feet from an injury back in 2010, so being able to stay home has helped him out incredibly and vastly improved the quality of life of all of us. Like 97% of Etsy sellers, I run my shop from my home. In fact, we just finished building a studio onto our house to increase productivity. My creative business allows me to pursue my creative passions in the comfort of my home, surrounded by my family. And while my story is unique, this pathway to rural entrepreneurship is not. There are over 2.1 million Etsy sellers across the globe, and together we sold $3.9 billion in goods in 2018. And I'm about to run out of time, so I would appreciate any questions to follow up at the end of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stout. And now, Mr. Ward, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member Shabbat, on behalf of digitally empowered small businesses across the country, thank you for holding this important hearing. I am coincidentally also a Maine native, and I want to commend you for pulling together, though inadvertently, the most Maine-centric panel in the history of Congress. It isn't often that small-town America gets a seat at the table, let alone 2 of them. I'm grateful for the opportunity. My hometown of Greenville, Maine is small. It's fewer than 1,500 residents small. It's everybody knows everybody else small. There are no chain stores or big companies. In my hometown, every business is a small business. And those businesses are the foundation of the town, the community, and the local economy. That is the rule in rural America, not the exception. It is true that much has changed in rural America, but small businesses are as important today as they've ever been. The digital age has brought its share of challenges, but also created many opportunities. Digital resources empower local businesses to rise above and grow beyond their geographic limitations and find customers around the world, where before the next county would have seemed a world away. I'm here today to offer the support and help of the Connected Commerce Council as this committee works to unlock the potential of America's small businesses. As the son of a small business owner in a rural town in a rural state, it's my hope that 3C can provide resources, education, and access that helps rural small businesses realize their potential. It's also my intention to work with policymakers anywhere, including and especially members of this committee, to accomplish our shared goal. As we've already heard from this panel today, the challenge of every small business is unique, but their stories are universal. Unleashing the potential of rural America requires small businesses have access to 4 things: capital, affordable broadband service, talent, and finally, access to affordable, secure, and scalable digital tools. It also requires that we understand that the digital economy is a different type of interconnected and interdependent economy where the investment of global platforms have direct, tangible, local benefits that can be measured in new employees and increased financial services, security. In Congress and in many state capitals, debates on data privacy, cybersecurity, and competition policy are underway that will dramatically affect small businesses' ability to succeed or even survive. If our data privacy laws focus only on consumer protection and tech giants, they will fail to recognize and preserve the importance of data and analytics that enable small businesses to compete with larger urban-based companies on quality and price rather than proximity and size. Cybersecurity policy that focuses on only the biggest breaches and the gravest risks will leave small businesses in the crosshairs of ransomware predators and hackers. Competition regulators who focus only on company size will miss the benefits that digital platforms and marketplaces provide to 3C members and digitally empowered small businesses nationwide. Frankly, I'm concerned we may lose the forest through the trees and focus too much on the largest, most prominent companies, to the detriment of small businesses that will ultimately pay the price if business models are dramatically changed, costly regulation is enacted, or access to essential tools is limited. The reality of the digital economy is, for 3C members and nearly 30 million small businesses like them, is that they stand on the shoulders of large companies to reach otherwise unobtainable heights. Too often, opportunity driven by innovation is assumed rather than promoted and protected. Too often, we talk about small businesses rather than with small businesses. I know under the leadership of this committee that will change. If the committee wishes to unleash the potential of American small businesses, you must make sure that this Congress and state legislators do not limit access to the tools they need. We must take great care to ensure that policies focused on the largest companies do not inadvertently undermine small businesses' opportunities. Your contribution to unleashing the potential of all small businesses, including those in rural America, can be your vigilant defense of small businesses' access to the technologies they need to succeed. Thank you, again, for your attention to this important subject and for securing a seat at the table for America's small businesses. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, and all the members, all the witnesses, for sharing your stories and showing to us the challenges and the great potential that exists in promoting economic opportunities in rural America, and that is our responsibility. So I'm very grateful for your testimony. Mr. Connors, can you elaborate on the economic cost to rural communities of not having high-quality, reliable broadband?
Certainly, Madam Chair. I would not express that in terms of dollars.
Is your mic on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be pleased to give that a response, not so much on the specificity of the actual numbers of dollars. I mean, the report bears out very effectively that with adequate access, $84 billion, 360,000 new jobs is pretty significant, which represents a 20% increase in business. That would certainly apply to us. We have found that in our state, advancements have been made, but there still remains 83,000 that do not have access. And that's based upon that FCC standard of 25.3, at which there may be even more. And I think that what we're finding is that in our state, the opportunities to address the two most important issues in our state, and this is borne out by a report, an initiative that was based upon a collaborative effort between 3 organizations, one of which was research organization, that 8 years ago we came together and have continued that initiative. But 8 years ago, when the business community was surveyed and a poll was taken, the response was, and the whole initiative called Make Maine Work was to actually provide for the administration the priorities. At that time, we were in a recession. So you can imagine it was all about tax incentives, those types of issues. Today, the issues that are most important that will serve our state and particularly the rural community is workforce, skill and education, and broadband. They are our top 2 issues. The business community has adopted it, and so has our
Connors,
governor.
I would like to hear also
Yep.
from Ms. Stout and Mr.
I'm sorry.
Ingersoll, but we will have a second round, and I
Thank
just
you.
want to discuss the workforce
Yep.
IT skills. Ms. Stout and Mr. Ingersoll, can you speak to how broadband limitations in rural communities have either stifled your ability or your community's ability to grow and adapt to digital commerce?
Even though that we have access in my area to high-speed internet, the speeds are never accurate. They claim a 7 megabyte service will average 4 to 5 megabytes, but the other side to that is there's periods where I'm getting 1 megabyte, and it's very difficult for my business to operate like that. To call and set up a service call or something to that degree to get a repair person out. They'll give me a 2-week wait time, to get the internet looked at, and during that period, I have to do things like, I can tether off of my cell phone occasionally, cell service has improved in my area to the point where that's viable, but I'm already paying for a service that's not performing, and, it's got a direct cost to my business.
Thank you. Ms. Dowd?
Pretty much the same things that he touched on are what I deal with also. We don't have a very reliable service, and we don't have very many options where I live. So you just kind of pick the best one that you can get and go off of it. I end up using my cell phone also to maintain my business contacts, because I have to answer messages pretty frequently because I work with brides who worry a lot. So I always need to be in contact with people, and that's my main concern.
Thank you. And Mr. Ingersoll and Ms. Stout, have you had any type of interaction with any of the programs of the Small Business Administration, whether helping you put together a business plan or helping you accessing lending?
I've had no contact.
Yes, Ms. Stout.
I've also haven't had no contact with them either.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Stout, as an entrepreneur, well, my time is almost up, so I will now recognize Mr. Balderson, a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Innovation and Workforce Development, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but as the chairwoman, you can keep on going if you want to, so please don't let me take that away from you. Thank you, panel, for being here. Mr. Ingersoll, this will probably be the first time this has ever happened. I'm sorry what happened to you. I raced motocross, just got done with the GNCC series. Then I decided to run for Congress, so my motorcycle racing days, both KTMs, 450 and 200, have been sold and gone. But like you, the Madam Chair talked about one of the questions I had for you. Do you remember flex bars? I was the first guy in the country that started selling those online and going all over, and that was back in 2005, 2006 range. And I had a really challenging time. I live in Appalachia, which is in Ohio, rural Ohio, is where I'm actually from. But I was going to ask you, you had no hard time getting access to broadband of any sort, or Mrs. Stout, because I'm shocked by that.
At the time of my injury was the first time that we had access to broadband internet. That was 2008. It's improved over time to where it's more functional now, but I would say from 2008 until about 2015, it was very difficult. It had a direct impact to my business because there was days where we couldn't process orders because the internet was down, and I hadn't found workarounds for that.
Okay. And you talked in your opening statement about your United States Postal Service, and I totally agree with you. Folks don't know about the private carriers and what we had to do with that, and I'm sure most of you do, but I attest to that also. They were very important to me. Mrs. Stout, this question's for you. I mean, you had no inconsistency or lack of broadband when you first started out, or any issues at all?
I don't really remember having a lot of issues getting internet. It's mostly the reliability that is an issue. Like I said, ours cuts out quite frequently, kind of on a schedule almost, like they almost plan it. So I kind of work around that with my cell phone. But yeah, it was pretty easy to get it. I'm fairly new though, so I mean 2015-ish. So
Okay. Madam Chair, you're back the rest of my time. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentle lady from Iowa, Ms. Finkenauer, Chairwoman of Subcommittee on Rural Development, Agricultural Trade, and Entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question is for Ms. Stout. Again, thank you so much for being here today. Really happy to have you. And, you know, my short time in Congress so far, just the last couple of months, this committee and myself have really been focused on reducing barriers for entrepreneurs and looking at ways to ensure that we have an environment where small businesses, especially in rural areas, can create good paying jobs and also take care of their families. One of the things I want to do is plan a listening session within the district and talk to young folks all across the district, figuring out ways that we can get, again, more entrepreneurs, make sure we're cutting down on those barriers so that they're able to have what they need to start and create good paying jobs so that we can keep Iowans in Iowa and also bring some back home, which is incredibly important to me as well. One of the things, though, that I've already have started to hear when it comes to barriers for a young person to even start a business and want to even become an entrepreneur has to do with some things like paid family leave and those issues where it's incredibly important right now. You know, I know there's a lot of ideas out there that, and I won't take this committee to debate those, but I will say from my understanding, they are incredibly important from folks in Iowa and across the country, and we need to make sure that our entrepreneurs are able to have leave policies to be able to, again, start their business, but also take care of their family. And one of the things I also wanted to touch on too, I understand there are other barriers we look at with the emergence of the digital economy that, you know, pros and cons that go along with it with our cities and towns, also other things, you know, healthcare, retirement benefits, student loans, and broadband, for example, that folks are dealing with. What are some of the barriers very specifically for you, Afton, to becoming an entrepreneur? And then what would you like to see happen to encourage more young people to get involved and also be able to take that next step to be an entrepreneur themselves?
Okay, that's a good question. A long question and a lot of answers. I would say first off, my biggest issue so far has been healthcare, which is very important for both my husband and I because we both have health issues. Luckily, well, we were on government assistance previously before business started doing so well. My husband was a barista and I was a pharmacy technician, and I quit to stay home with my son. But looking at the healthcare marketplace was very overwhelming. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done with that. It was not very realistic, the quotes that I was getting for what I would need to pay out of pocket to get insurance for my family. I did look into other options outside of the marketplace then because it just was far too expensive. Another issue that has come up has been taxes to different jurisdictions in different areas where now I know that Etsy collects state sales tax for Iowa, so I don't have to worry about that, which is very helpful. If we were to have to collect, I know there are some bills that may require after a certain threshold that we collect sales tax for those outside states that we ship to. I believe it was $100,000 or so. But if we had to do that, that would make it very, very hard for us to keep track of as a small business, since I do all of my own paperwork and everything. Next year, I'm actually paying somebody to do my taxes for the first time. So exciting. But yeah, that I do all my own paperwork otherwise. So if I had to keep track of taxes, otherwise I would definitely have to hire somebody else, which is also another set of paperwork and everything. So those are the two main things. Things that would help, of course, are the internet issue, making sure that we have reliable internet, healthcare, making sure that healthcare is more affordable, and paid leave. Luckily, I'm in a very lucky situation where my husband has gotten to stay home and take care of my son, because otherwise I could not do what I was doing or what I am doing. So those things are very important to me, and I'm sure to others.
Well, I
Thank
look
you.
forward to working on them, and I look
Thank
forward to having
you.
this conversation and continuing. But I know my time is about to expire, and again, thank you so much, all of you, for being here today, truly. And with that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentle lady yields back, and now we recognize the ranking member, Mr. Chabot.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to apologize for having to leave. We're marking up the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, and Judiciary, and I had an amendment that was being called up, so I had to go over and take care of that, so apologize. Mr. Ward, let me start with you if I can. You mentioned the importance of cybersecurity for small firms, at least in your written testimony. I assume you probably talked about it in your oral testimony as well, and I really couldn't agree more. Would a nationwide network of counselors that are trained in cybersecurity measures help small firms prepare for cyber attacks? And additionally, would it be beneficial to offer some sort of safe harbor to small firms that have been victimized by a cyber attack so they're free to share that information with the federal government to help strengthen the nation's entire cybersecurity network?
The short answer, sir, is yes, but this being Congress, I'll give you the longer one. The cyber attacks for small businesses are extinction level events.
Yeah.
They will put companies out of business. The reporting, the burden of reporting is complex, often too complex for very small businesses, for micro businesses, as it currently stands. I think a national network is a really good idea. I think that safe harbor is an essential idea. I want to congratulate you and Madam Chairwoman for the introduction of 1648, 1649, two bills that are bipartisan in this environment is remarkable, but also they really go to the heart of the issue. You know, they are simple solutions to an otherwise complex burden. 3C is fully behind both of those. In fact, we'd be more than happy to be part of the solution for 1649 and the network of training that you've proposed.
Thank you. Well, in the spirit of bipartisanship, the chairwoman and I heard testimony about, you just mentioned it can be an existential event to a small business if they have a cyber attack. Many literally go out of business as a result of that. They go under. And so this legislation should really help. And it's 1648 and 49, as you mentioned, and Ms. Velasquez and I introduced it together. So hopefully we're going to make progress on that in a bipartisan manner and maybe actually be able to help the small business community tremendously with
Wonderful.
that. So
We'd love to help.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ingersoll, I'll get to you next if I could. Could you tell us about how your business kind of grew over time? Was it to areas in New York, for example, and then maybe across the country, and then followed by, I guess, exporting around the globe, I guess, through eBay? Or did it more or less all come at once, or what was how did it unfold in your particular instance?
Initially, I mean, being online, you're going to get a variety of customers to begin with. There are certain areas of the Southwest, in the Southeast, there are primary areas that our sales come in from. And the traffic that eBay brings, to my business, and the visibility worldwide, that allows me a lot of opportunities in these different markets that, if I was stuck to just my state or my county or my town, those opportunities wouldn't be there. So I was able to grow my business completely off of the volume of sales I was getting from eBay.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Stout, you mentioned that the minute you got on Etsy, your whole world changed. So what's next? Small businesses are always at the forefront of what's next because they have to be in order to compete with the larger companies that you compete all the time with. Are there new technologies out there that you see on the horizon or that you're already anticipating that'll allow you to continue to grow your business in the future?
Honestly, I'm at a point in my business where I don't want to grow any bigger.
Okay.
Because I would have to hire help, and I don't. I'm happy being able to support my family and give back to my community where I'm at. As far as new technology, I'm not really sure. I've been sticking with Etsy and Facebook pretty much, and they've helped me out a lot. They reach a very, very large audience of people
If
at
it ain't
this
broke,
point.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right.
Right? Yeah.
Work.
So I'm happy where I am. So I
Excellent.
haven't really looked.
I'm glad to see somebody happy where they're
Yeah,
at. That's
yeah,
good.
thank
Okay.
you.
And finally, Mr. Connors, it's tough to get more rural than some parts of northern Maine, and I have a two-part question. I'll try to get it real quick because my time's almost run out. Do you happen to know the percentage of northern Mainers that have access to high-speed internet and those that don't? And secondly, with the advent of 5G technology and the way it's transferring the way we all communicate, do you happen to know what percentage of Maine has access to the 5G or 4 or 3 for that matter?
Originally, where I was a city manager for years. I mentioned earlier in my response that there's 83,000 individuals that do not have access to broadband, and those are in the rural area predominantly of our state. And when you go north, there are pockets. That's the irony of this issue. Within that 83,000 without access, you'll find that in certain places where you'd least expect it, there is adequate service for that character of whether it's the business or the individual. But I would say a large percentage would be in my part of the state where I came from. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My time's expired, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman's time has expired, and now we recognize Mr. Golden from Maine, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Mr. Connors, I'm sure that you have members back home in Maine who run businesses and are very similar to Mr. Ingersoll and Ms.
Yes.
Stout, and I see you nodding your head as they talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that they face working what they do. You know, you were commissioner of the Department of Maine Transportation for a number of years, and you know, through my time in politics, I've traveled around, talked to businesses. I think we both agree. Normally, I hear their top concerns in Maine: infrastructure, workforce, high energy costs, and then regulation. You know, falls into the mix. You know, just thinking about the way that we fund our roads and bridges, which I know you're very familiar with. I mean, we've got federal highway, state highway fund. We do some municipal stuff, throw that into the mix, some bonding in Maine, as you know. Would you agree that broadband or even access to faster internet in a lot of rural areas of Maine is essentially become the economic highway of the 21st century?
Absolutely.
Just as critical.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that opening, because I was a commissioner for 11 years, and I used to go around the state preaching the gospel that highways and bridges and transportation are the foundation of our economic system. And in the following comment would be, it costs a lot to build and maintain, but it costs a lot more not to. And you know what? The very parallel between transportation and this issue is striking, because frankly, it has many of the same features, both in terms of its impact, but it also has many of the similar features in terms of how we resolve it. Those 83,000 that do not have access, that answer is going to come about when we share responsibilities, like when the electrifying America took place, we were all at the table. When we're looking at this issue, we need to be all at the table, and priorities will be given to usage and those types of things. But I think your point is spot on, that I would say that, in my opinion, while infrastructure overall is extremely important to our state, as well as any state, broadband, high-speed internet connection is the key to our future. It's borne out on this report. To me, it's parallel with transportation and does not deserve any other priority than a top priority.
Thank you very much. You know, knowing how important it is to our economy and all the members of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, I'm sure if you had the capital, if your members could afford to build that infrastructure themselves, they would do it, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that's a point to be made, is that our providers have done well for the middle mile, reaching out, bearing in mind the characteristics of our state, how rural we are, how small business we are, and that type of thing, that they want to do it, but the return on investment It's simply not there. And that's why we need that partnership to develop it. When we do, and when we deal with the digital literacy, because not everyone is aware of the incredible potential that exists, the value that it brings. It's expanded fast, and that's good, but there's more to do, and I think the answer lies in all of us coming together. And as you know, our governor has teed this up with an expectation of major bond issues this year and the next several years.
And so as the state of Maine looks to put a little bit of skin in the game and taxpayers show us that they're willing to make those investments in infrastructure, some federal help would be important.
Yes, it would. And I think that is the relationship that we need to fix this issue.
Thank
to
you.
address the issue.
I appreciate that very much. Just shifting gears very quickly with the last minute I have left, since Mr. Ward is from Maine, I have to ask you a question as well. You touched on this a little bit. As Congress is looking into privacy matters, you know, pertaining to the digital world, and some of the people that you work with, your business included, and this includes in state legislatures, I'm sure that you probably are advocating on these issues around the country. As we look into privacy regulation, would you support small business exemptions? And if so, where's the trigger? I mean, at what size does a company grow so large that we have to have some regulation to make sure that consumers are being protected in terms of their privacy and data and information?
Thank you, Congressman. When we're talking about data privacy, 3C generally opposes carve-outs, exemptions of any kind, because frankly, this is really important. It's important that we get this right. Data has been in the news a lot over the last several years, obviously, but if you're able to put a small business exemption or carve-out into a piece of legislation, you're doing it because you believe the burden is too high, that the compliance burden is too high, and you are saying that the size of the company or the size of their user base matters more than the privacy of a smaller number of people, which frankly betrays the motives of the regulation in the first place. As a former Capitol Hill staffer and somebody who's been doing this for a little while, my advice to both Congress and to the state legislators would be to write a better bill. You know, do the job. Write legislation and regulation that applies to everybody, that raises the standard and the practice for companies large and small, but has a compliance burden and a requirement of administration low enough that a two-person shop could do it. Right? If we can do that with our own taxes, we can do it with data privacy.
The gentleman's time has expired, and now I recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today and ask you questions, and thank you all so much for being here. Especially thank you, Mr. Ingersoll, for your story, for what you've done, how you've been successful and truly realized the American dream. It's different for all of us. I think you would agree. As a business owner, job creator for over 34 years, I know firsthand how difficult it is to quantify broadband access into our rural communities, and how valuable this access can be to our small business. Again, as a lifelong small business person, my goal is always try to keep government out of my way so I can do the things that truly compete with one another. I only have one question, and I'd like to ask each of you the same question. So obviously the person who goes last is going to get a real opportunity here. But when it comes to broadband, all of us on this committee are probably getting asked whether this should be a government-driven project or a private industry-driven project. Could you give me your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Mr. Connors.
Thank you. In our state, it has been privately driven. We're at the point today where government at the state level has recognized its value and the need to participate. And we would look forward to having the federal government be a part of that answer. I think it involves all of us. But to date, let me be clear, it has been privately driven for them almost entirely.
Okay, Mr. Ingersoll?
Where I'm from, it's private, but I believe they're controlled monopolies. So the telecommunications company that I deal with has really no incentive to send someone to rural areas when they're having issues with higher population centers. I see the internet as a public utility, So whatever is going to provide the best service to the people, I'm all for. I really don't have an opinion one way or the other aside from that.
My assumption is, being an entrepreneur yourself, that you'd like to see two people compete in the area for the same business of some sort.
Yeah.
To drive down cost and to drive up access.
More than anything, improve the quality of service.
Sure. Yeah. Ms. Stout?
Very similar to Mr. Ingersoll. I have a couple of options for internet in my town, and it is public driven. I think the government could help. But yeah, definitely having more competition would help, and increasing the reliability, for sure, working on that, making sure there are certain standards and they have to stick with what they say they're giving you would help. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Ward?
I guess I have the advantage because I get to go last.
Sure.
I think that a public-private partnership is really the only solution when you're talking about both controlled monopolies and natural monopolies. The technological feasibility of the last mile is hard enough. It's even worse when it has to go through 20 miles of forest to get to two people. You can't make that math work in a open market purely. There has to be a partnership.
Very good. Well, I thank each of you for this. I've listened to all your testimony, obviously, since I've been here. Again, I apologize, like the chairman, for there's so many committee hearings going on today. But thank you all so much, and it's great to see, especially what you did from figuring out a way to be successful, and that's an awesome story. And there's nothing greater in this country to have the opportunity to start a job. I would challenge you to hire somebody, though, because the world changes when you have employees. Thank you so much. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize Mr. Delgado from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ingersoll, thank you for taking the time from your business in Sloansville to testify here today. It's great to hear all that you've accomplished in the face of tragedy. The committee appreciates you sharing your story. It's clear that reliable internet access is critically important for someone like you to get online and reach your customers. And I really agree wholeheartedly with the way you frame the issue in terms of being a public utility. We know that about 40% of rural Americans lack broadband internet access, and 25% of my home district doesn't have broadband subscription. Clearly, we need real investment in broadband services, but it also strikes me, and you spoke about this in your testimony, that like broadband, we need universal, affordable postal service that ensures that rural businesses can reach their customers. And so we spent a bit of time talking a lot about the rural broadband piece, and I would love to hear from you a bit more on the impact on rural communities if the postal service was privatized.
I have concerns about it being privatized, just because, like right now with UPS, FedEx, and these other carriers that are private companies, they charge rural surcharges, fuel surcharges, and all these sorts of things to deliver to these rural areas. The post office, makes it very accessible, and if you want to keep the barrier of entry low for e-commerce in general, the Postal Service is the only one that's really going to provide that service where you can be competitive with, larger companies that, have their own logistics networks and their own deals with carriers, to compete with a bigger advantage over, someone who's just starting out. So, I would say, privatizing it would be a big concern to me, because you're going to cut out rural America is going to be cut out of the deal. Or at the very least, you're going to increase the cost for people who are already, struggling.
So it would specifically hurt your business?
Yeah, it would specifically hurt me.
In terms of the overhead and the cost increases. You talked about controlled monopolies, another insight that I agree with, and the need to figure out how government needs to play a role, whether it is in partnership with private actors or otherwise, and specifically given the fact that rural communities, time and time again, particularly as we lurch towards privatization in almost every public sector, is leaving specifically rural communities behind, because they do not have the population centers to incentivize private actors to make the investment. And so while we might have access and have had access for some time as you note, since 2008, we see the disproportionate disadvantages that the rural communities are struggling with. Could you speak a bit more about how the quality or lack thereof of your broadband access has really impacted your ability to conduct business?
Well, as e-commerce has evolved, buyer expectations have increased, so it becomes it's much more of a priority to process orders quickly and things like that. If your internet goes down and you have no other way to process those orders, it's going to negatively impact you. And as e-commerce continues to grow, competition increases. People in more urban areas with better access to internet are having a big advantage over their rural competitors because of that. I think it's essential to even the playing field in that regard.
Excellent. Thank you very much, man. I yield back.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back, and Mr. Stober from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes. He's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the witnesses, thank you for your testimony. I, too, am a small business owner for 28 years in rural northern Minnesota, and so I understand what you're going through and some of the concerns. One of the things, we talk about broadband being deployed. What I've said is high-speed, dependable internet is not a luxury anymore. It's an absolute necessity. And rural America seems to be put on the back burner. Mr. Ward, I appreciate your comments about it has to be that public-private partnership. Rural Minnesota, rural America is left behind it, and it's not acceptable anymore. And so I hear my colleagues from Colorado and Iowa saying the same thing. We have a lot of support for deploying that broadband. And I love the fact that you all have nodded your head when you understand that competition is good for deploying that, because competition is good for the consumer. And we know that for a variety of reasons, dependable broadband is absolutely needed. We can go in some of our rural areas that are just miles apart, the same value of a home. A resale of a home is going to go higher when it has a dependable broadband and high-speed service. So, Mr. Ingersoll, you talked about the Postal Service, and I really appreciate that. In a time when everything is online and digitalized, I think we forget how many people and industries depend on dependable postal service, which make our experience as consumers possible and help expand small businesses like yours. I've recently co-sponsored a number of resolutions to maintain important aspects of the Postal Service, such as door delivery and 6-day mail service, so that we can continue to support small rural businesses across this nation. As Congress continues to discuss postal reform, what are some of the biggest challenges you foresee should the Postal Service become limited in rural areas? And please give me an estimated annual cost to your business if the Postal Service doesn't continue the 6-day service or limits its rural delivery and pickups.
It would be tough for me to speak to an exact number on that, just because I don't know exactly what percentage of my customers are in a rural area. Typically the nature of my business, you're going to get more of a rural customer base than an urban customer base, just because people aren't riding ATVs in cities. But I mean, overall, if you limit that, I'm going to have to stop using the Postal Service and, spend more to go with FedEx or UPS, someone that's going to, offer delivery that a customer is going to expect. Unfortunately, I don't set the precedent for what a customer expects. Larger companies do that, negotiate their own deals, with carriers. So it makes me it puts me at a big disadvantage in comparison to.
Well, can you just give me an idea of the amount of product you sell and send? What would it give the committee an idea just a rough guess what it would cost if you had to add those additional charges from other competitors?
Well, first off, we use a lot of the priority and regional boxes, which are supplied by the Postal Service. We send about 8,000 shipments a year with the Postal Service. So the average cost of a box is around $1 if I had to buy it. So there's $10,000 in cost. The next nearest carrier that offers a comparable service to USPS and the flat rate program is FedEx, and they're on average about $5 more per shipment than priority mail. So 5 times 10,000 plus,
Yep. It'd be a significant increase.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And with my last 30 seconds here, Mr. Ward, you talked about you've worked on the Hill, and you made a statement to both the House and Senate that make a better bill. I can assure you that's exactly why I ran, to make sure that rural America, rural Minnesota, we matter. And I appreciate those comments, and we're going to work that. And with your testimony, your expertise, it helps us all. So I want to thank you all for taking your time and giving us your stories, and we appreciate it. So, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentle lady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Chrissy Houlihan. I'm a small business and entrepreneur person as well, and have grown a lot of businesses from the beginning, and did online sales back in the early 2000s of footwear and apparel. So I know the trials and tribulations of trying to start up a business and trying to get things into a box to where they're going across the country with all of its ancillary problems. And my questions, I guess, have to do a little bit with, for Mr. Ward, your conversation and your testimony, both orally and written, that had to do with an emphasis on public and private partnerships for small businesses to worry about things like cybersecurity and cyberspace. And I was wondering if you could put a little bit more meat on the bone of what you mean by a public and private partnership, and how those small businesses can be tapped into being able to be safe and secure online.
Certainly. Thank you. I appreciate the question. It's amazing how many small business owners are members of Congress now, isn't it? I think there's something that has to do with the experience of starting your own business and dealing with myriad of problems at the same time. It is beyond the pale to also ask small businesses to consider how to pay the bills, how to deal with the logistics, how to have a good idea, how to deal with their staff, and to become IT experts, right? And far too often, the burden of running a small business can become overwhelming if you don't have answers. You don't have somebody to turn to for guidance. And on the issue of cybersecurity, I think most small businesses would feel very alone indeed. One of the issues is that ransomware, hacks, breaches, data theft generally are, they put small businesses completely out of business. They are extinction level events because they cost so much, but also because they are, the compliance required is far over the head of most small business owners.
But what does a private-public partnership look like?
If the SBA, for example, were given more resources and more guidance on how to make training available and how to make the tools and resources available for small businesses, we would be more likely to use them. Additionally, there needs to be a safe harbor. There needs to be a place, a way for small businesses to report hacks and breaches that doesn't feel like it's going to be the end of their business. The next piece I think that is essential is we have to find a way to better fund prosecution of these hacks and data breaches. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but I believe it's something like 1% of all cyber attacks are ever reported, and less than 10% of those are ever intervened or prosecuted. There's no deterrence. And without the public enforcement, there is no private incentive. And so there needs to be a better understanding between small businesses and the SBA, Department of Commerce generally, DHS specifically, on how they can work together to harden the target that is small business data sets. Because cumulatively, that's valuable data, but too often we pay attention to the large breaches, hotel chains, retail stores, because it's bigger. It's more data. Cumulatively is just as much data in the small business community.
Thank you, and I appreciate your feedback. And I have one question. I hate to keep coming back to the USPS, the Postal Service thing, because it's intriguing to me as somebody who is in charge of operations and shipping and logistics. But can you try to quantify the impact if you needed to go to DHL or to FedEx, and we're no longer able to use the USPS as 80% of your shipments are going out of the USPS? Would you be able, Mr. Ingersoll, to talk about the impact on the bottom line?
The effect that would have would make what I do, it wouldn't be a viable option any longer. The problem is there's a lot of reproduction Chinese parts, whereas I sell OEM parts that are coming over, and they're already, within competition to us. But the problem is, if my costs increase, it would price me out completely. My customers are typically lower income, and they won't spend extra money, for the same thing they were used to purchasing before.
Thank you. And my last question has to do with kind of the impact of women-owned businesses, and I'm interested in trying to understand from you, Ms. Stout, if you can tell me a little bit about, I know the question was about family leave, and I think you came back around appropriately to healthcare as being probably the biggest issue. What would it look like to feel like that you were supported to be able to have a small business in terms of access to healthcare, quality, affordable, accessible healthcare? What are the pressure points for you right now as a small business owner?
Thank you for the question. It's pretty in-depth, I think.
I have 8 seconds left.
There's a lot that goes on with it. I think just having better options. It was very hard for me to navigate when I was searching and looking for things to help support my family once I realized that I was going to need to find another solution.
And maybe what I can do, since I'm over time, is afterwards I can find you and
please
learn
follow up.
Yeah.
I would love to answer.
I appreciate your time, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The gentle lady's time has expired, and now we recognize Mr. Burchett from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And I appreciate y'all being here. I myself have done a little eBay. I think I had over 1,000 transactions on eBay. Last week I sold a pair of jeans, and I know that when my daughter watches this, when she gets home from school, that money will probably be back out in the economy before I can get home. So I'm looking forward to that. And matter of fact, when I was in the legislature in Tennessee, I carried legislation for eBay. I didn't profit from it. It wasn't that type of a situation. It was just some clarification in the law of where they were. But and all the questions really have been asked that I had. But this is sort of a catch-all, and I'm always asking folks this, and I would like just an honest answer, and we can start down at the end. And Mr. Ingersoll, I ride a few bikes myself. Mine are all old Kickstarters, though. They're not electric starts or anything quite as fancy as what you deal with. But I guess my catch-all question is would you all be willing to explain any burdens that you see that government is placing on small businesses right now that if you could have changed overnight, you would? Yeah, go ahead. I want everybody to answer that too, if they could.
As far as the federal government, aside from some of the tax policy not being formed around sales tax, the thing about bringing opportunity to these rural areas is keeping the barrier of entry low. And when you need to keep track of 50 different sales tax, it becomes a real problem because, if you're starting out with $20,000 or $30,000 in sales just trying to make a living or something like that, and you need to keep track of all that, you have to hire an accountant. You may have to implement software to track it all, and time. You don't want to make it more difficult than it needs to be for someone to go out there and compete, because if you're going up someone like Amazon, they have the resources to handle that. A small company doesn't.
Do any of the websites that I guess you just sell primarily on eBay, do they currently now do take the sales tax out for the states that are not brick and mortar in your state or wherever?
I believe anywhere that there's a marketplace nexus.
Okay. Anybody else have problems?
I have several problems with the regulatory burdens, but I think the primary burden that both state and federal governments currently are placing on small businesses that we can talk about today is uncertainty. Uncertainty for a small business is fatal, right? Not knowing what the market looks like, not knowing what access to tools or talent or broadband will look like in 18 months makes it incredibly difficult to plan. For large businesses, market uncertainty can be an opportunity. For small businesses, it's incredibly detrimental. We need to figure this out sooner than later in order to restore some level of sanity to the marketplace.
I would add to that, uncertainty clearly is an issue, particularly as it relates to this effort. But for most businesses, the companion piece would be predictability, so that there's not a problem for most businesses to recognize you need to be regulated, you need to address certain issues. But when those barriers or when those issues change or the regulations around those issues change, that becomes a real problem. So with uncertainty would also be the need for predictability within any regulation.
Right. I think something that troubled me was you would find out after the fact.
Exactly.
It's very tough to retroactively pull that back.
Yeah.
And it hurts the small business. Big businesses, they have accountants and lobbyists and lawyers up here, and they can tell them exactly. Yes.
There's also something has happened over the last 5 to 10 years where we've developed in terms of a digital tool stack for small businesses, right? You can get your email through Gmail, you can use Infusionsoft to do your CRM, you can use Amazon as a marketplace or eBay as a marketplace, and some of these other logistics groups. The price point for those tools is as low as it is because of math that has been done at the larger level. If you change that business model for larger tech companies or even platforms generally, you also change the math for the small business. So most of that burden is inadvertent, right? Nobody was aiming for small businesses, but if you aim at the top of the interconnected digital economy, you're going to hit the bottom.
Thank y'all. I'm out of time, and I appreciate y'all's entrepreneurship and being willing to roll the dice. And ma'am, if you'd have been here, all these people got tax-free status for a year, but since you walked out, you missed your opportunity. Thank you, Chair Lady, for an excellently run meeting. Thank you, ma'am.
The gentleman's time has expired, and we recognize the gentle lady from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and thanks to each of you. This is. Sorry, I've been in and out too, but I'm also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, so we're working hard to have those conversations about how we can bring rural broadband, high-speed internet to every single part of America to help us revitalize and allow you to continue to build those small businesses. So a lot of the questions certainly have been asked today, and Mr. Ingersoll, I wanted to just start with you. You've talked about that, rural broadband being essential to ensuring the success of your small business. In our hearing here last week, we focused on the relationship between broadband and the potential larger infrastructure package that we're going to be considering, we certainly hope. Such a package is likely to support our existing federal recreational trails program, and that helps fund the development and maintenance of many trails, including ATV trails, which is very popular back in my home state of Minnesota as well. My question to you is then, what do you see as the most viable path forward to get broadband out to our rural communities and make that a reality? And if we're unsuccessful in some of those areas, what does that do in terms of affecting your business?
Well, I mean, anyone that doesn't have access to the internet that they can, if they can't easily navigate it or it's consistently down, they're not going to feel comfortable shopping online. They're going to look for other outlets, for whatever they're trying to search out, because a lot of these rural communities, you have groups of people who aren't familiar enough with the internet yet to have trust in it. They don't understand aspects of it. So I think that reliable service would be the foundation of that. And I mean, I think the future is e-commerce. So, ensuring that everyone has access to it in a similar manner is essential for, any business to grow in the future.
Thank you. I worked for a big business for about 2 decades, 2 different big businesses, and after that, I ended up becoming a senior advisor before being elected to Congress to a small startup company. So I just want to say how much harder it is to work for a small business than it is a large business in this country. And I applaud you, Mrs. Stout, for the work that you did to build your business. It's wonderful. Let me ask this question of both of you, though. What would you do different if you had to start this all over again? What mistakes did you make, and is there any advice to entrepreneurs and small businesses, and how can we take that into account as we look at either regulation or infrastructure decisions?
I would say initially I underestimated the potential that marketplaces like eBay have. I was thinking much smaller initially than I should have, and long term it would have benefited me to realize that opportunity earlier. Outside of that, there isn't really much I would change, as far as how I operated and grew my business. The one thing, though, that needs to be considered, I think, with policy is businesses have shifted from being larger retail outlets to being very low revenue, one to 5 person operations. And, if policy isn't formed around that, it's just going to push that opportunity to larger companies. And unless you want to work in a fulfillment center, there isn't going to be opportunity in these areas that are going to be impacted.
Mrs. Stout, do you have anything to add?
Similarly to what Mr. Ingersoll said, I would have started sooner if I would have known what I know now. Things went a lot better than I expected also. And also, yes, gearing more policy towards smaller businesses, and not assuming that we all want to be large businesses, because some of us don't. Some of us want to just support our families and communities, and that would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you both for your story and for your commitment to small business and the country. Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, I yield back my time.
Gentle lady yields back, and now we recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Snyder, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I want to thank the chairwoman for hosting this hearing, and as always, to thank the witnesses for your perseverance in staying here to the end, and I appreciate you waiting, but more importantly, for sharing your perspectives and experiences. It's critical. We're talking about unlocking the potential of digital economy in rural communities. I am also on the Ways and Means Committee. Last week we had a hearing on infrastructure. And I represent the northern suburbs of Chicago, not a lot of rural, but I understand how important rural broadband is. And I made the point there that we need to absolutely make rural broadband part of whatever infrastructure conversation we have to empower and make sure that our not just small businesses, but rural communities can compete. But I also know from my experience working with businesses large and small how important and how wonderful small businesses are. I happen to think that I prefer the small business world. I prefer being my own boss. And I was thinking, Mr. Ingersoll, you mentioned thought bigger, and coming from Chicago, I thought of Daniel Burnham, and I just looked up the quote to make sure. But it's make no little plans, because they otherwise have no magic to stir the soul. This is what it's about, is hopefully your businesses do stir your soul, and in so doing, you and millions of others, 29 small businesses in the country, that's what can drive and always has driven our economy. But we need to make sure we have that access to technology and the new successes. But with those new successes, there's also going to be challenges. And one of the challenges, which I know we've talked about a bit, is cybersecurity. Last Congress, I was fortunate, I was able, with my colleagues, to introduce the Small Business Cybersecurity Enhancement Act, which will help businesses address their gap in cybersecurity needs, from enhanced technology defenses to security awareness training. And it is key, because while, as you said, while it may be a smaller business, it can be a gateway to a bigger breach. It can affect, I don't care if it affects the millions or me alone is a big impact. And for everyone who is affected, that's true. So our business owners, my question to you is, what degree do you keep cybersecurity concerns in mind as you look to expand your business, as you think about those big plans? How are you addressing those vulnerabilities? And for Mr. Ward in particular, how are groups like 3C working with members to shore up these vulnerabilities and ensure everything from payment platforms to consumer information are protected? Anyone? Yeah.
Using eBay is a big advantage because I don't have to deal with storing that data or even handling it. You know, they're controlling that completely, so that burden is entirely off me. It's not even a concern.
Great. Great. Ms. Stout?
Very similar to Mr. Ingersoll again. I mostly work through Etsy and PayPal invoicing, so I don't see any secure information. It's all taken care of for me, which is very, very helpful. I would not want to have to deal with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before I go to Mr. Ward, Mr. Connors, anything you want to add?
Well, I would add this, that it's a real concern to businesses, needless to say. And we have tried to bring as much information through federal agencies and so forth to our state to help educate and inform our businesses as to the vulnerability, but also the things you can do to help address it.
Right. All right, great. And Mr. Ward, I'll give you the last word because we talked earlier with the question of public-private partnerships. This is where I do believe industry, government, educational institutions, groups like yours can work to raise the bar and give the security our small businesses need. So I'll leave you with the last word, the last minute.
Yeah, I agree with that. So in reverse order, 3C is relatively new to this space. We launched less than a year ago, but are growing pretty rapidly, and cybersecurity training and resources are at the top of the list we would like to deliver to our small business members. Working with SBA and state governments to hone those materials would be welcome opportunity. The biggest, the most often utilized tool for cybersecurity is what you just heard here. It's the platforms that offer secure data management, resources, and sort of take that burden off the small business. What I'm worried about, particularly in state legislative proposals right now, the California Consumer Privacy Act, for example, takes away some of that protection by classifying small businesses that cross over into compliance requirements at 50,000 installs, for example. Mm-hmm. They then become responsible for a data set. So if you're a realtor that has 50,000 names entered into a database, it doesn't matter that you're still storing it in a Google Doc. You are now responsible for that data, and you can't rely on a platform to hold your hand through that process. So the long answer is, I'm sorry, the short answer is we are eager to help our members. Thanks.
Right.
Bill, do you want the long one?
So, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And before I yield back, Madam Chairman, what I would like to add is we are at the frontier. These are new opportunities. Our small businesses are always at the frontier, whether it was the Industrial Revolution or today with the digital revolution. But there will always be unexpected surprises along the way. There will be unintended consequences. Together, working together, industry, policymakers, we have to find a way to ensure data security, create the opportunities through rural broadband and other digital access, and make sure that we're providing our entrepreneurs, American businesses, the chance to grow the American economy. With that, I yield back.
Gentlemen, time has expired. And I want to take this opportunity to again thank all the witnesses for taking time out of your busy schedule and be here and sharing your stories. It really brings it here to the halls of Congress, the importance of including small businesses, but especially rural America. And the rest, this is a bipartisan issue, and hopefully we all come together and build a consensus around an important issue that will unlock economic opportunities across the country. So whether it is purchasing transnational flights or providing distant telehealth services, the internet has completely changed our society. Most of all, digital platforms have changed the way entrepreneurs reach new and existing customers. But without reliable broadband, these new opportunities and the economic activity associated with them is severely hampered. That is why we must ensure digital tools reach every American wherever they call home. I will ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered, and if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.